Have you ever dreamt of the silhouette of an ideal woman? Her face is unclear, her name unknown, yet she is you, and not entirely you. She walks between light and shadow, serene as deep water, her eyes holding a knowingness you haven't yet dared to recall. Her presence makes your heart contract, a mix of fear and longing. She is not a specific person, she is an energy, something you cannot wear, cannot learn from books, cannot copy from another, and deep within, you know, it lives inside you, smoldering, primal, waiting to be awakened. Carl Jung called this the feminine archetype, the part of the soul dimmed by society, the wildness stifled by discipline. Not femininity in the mold of softness, pleasantness, or compliance, but a living mystery, ancient as the earth, fierce as embers burning beneath the ground. In today's video, we won't talk about women as roles. We'll explore the feminine as a vibrant force, powerful, sometimes dangerous, always mysterious, existing in both men and women, in every dream, in every emotion we cannot fully grasp. And trust me, if you feel something stirring within you, not loudly, but with quiet certainty, stay until the end. For what you're radiating might just be the latent energy long hidden in your soul. Number 1, the feminine is not a gender, but an inner force. In a world where femininity is boxed into labels, cute, gentle, alluring, living true to the archetypal feminine feels almost like rebellion. Yet this is where Carl Jung offers a definition so profound and shattering that if you truly grasp it, you will never live the same way again. The feminine is not about gender. It is a life force, an ancient archetype. A spiritual dimension exists in every human, regardless of gender. It's not in the body, not in a soft voice or a graceful gesture. It lies deep within, where you are more intuitive than logical, more feeling than reasoning, more listening than controlling. It is a wisdom beyond explanation, yet always true. A current that knows when to let go, when to wait, when to forgive, and when to walk away without looking back. Jung called this the anima in men, but for women, the feminine energy is the very home of their soul. It is the foundation of emotions, the rhythm of the inner self, the cyclical nature, and the capacity to contain, all that cannot be measured by formulas, but makes you truly human. Recall those moments when others sought you out for comfort, to be heard, to unburden their hearts. Not because you were idle or gossipy, but because you carry an energy field that makes others feel safe, allowing them to touch their essence. That's not a skill. It's the archetypal feminine at work. In modern healing practices, this is called the power of presence, a deep state of consciousness where the other feels you are truly there, not rushing to fix, analyze, or advise. You are simply present, like a still lake, allowing others to see their reflection without judgment. This is not easy, for it requires you to have journeyed through your shadows and chosen to stay there without fleeing. This is why the archetypal feminine cannot be faked. It's not something you can perform. It is the result of an ego melting away, of a soul torn apart, doubted, yet learning to sit with itself to understand. To understand pain, loss, and the parts of oneself once rejected. And this is why modern society, accustomed to a masculine pace, fast, goal-driven, efficient, and achievement-oriented, often causes women to lose connection with their inner feminine. They become capable, rational, controlled, always knowing what to do next, yet increasingly exhausted, empty, feeling, I'm no longer myself. This is not your fault. It's the inevitable consequence of a society that glorifies the sun and forgets the moon, that praises light and rejects darkness, that teaches us to be strong when sometimes the bravest act is to dare to be vulnerable without shame. Carl Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You don't become enlightened by envisioning light. You awaken only when you dare to name the darkness." And the feminine, in its archetypal sense, is the substance of that darkness. Not in a negative way, but the mystical darkness of dreams, of the womb, of the deep earth, where all life begins. The darkness that blinds you to sight but sharpens your sense of everything. In ancient Eastern cultures, the feminine was seen as the Tao, the non-action that accomplishes everything. Not acting, yet all transformation flows through it. Jung recognized this in his study of ancient symbols and understood that the feminine is not weak, but a silent strength that moves the world without fanfare. Today's world desperately craves this energy, but the good news is it cannot be mass-produced. It cannot be mimicked on social media. It's not about a dress, a soft voice, or a few kind words that can turn an ordinary person into someone with high femininity. The archetypal feminine is a living flame smoldering in every cell of your being, waiting to be nurtured by authenticity, by daring to shed every mask to become vulnerable, wild, gentle, rough, exactly as you are. But the painful truth is that many women were never taught they have the right to connect with this, nor do they even realize there's something called feminine energy within them. This often stems from childhood circumstances. For example, a girl growing up in a financially struggling family with a mother who always bore the weight, always the pillar, making decisions because there was no other choice. That girl was taught by her mother to be strong, independent, and tough. As she grows, she becomes a capable, resourceful woman who can do anything. But deep inside, when she sees other women being protected, supported, or gentle, she feels a fierce longing for that and wishes she, too, could live that way. And so, the feminine within her is not allowed to live, smothered by a survival mechanism. Look at your own life. How many times have you forced yourself to be fine, to be strong, to not bother anyone, to be proper? How many times have you wanted to cry but smiled instead? How many times did you know your body needed rest, yet you kept pushing to match the world's pace? Share your feelings below. This is a chance to let your emotions live without suppressing them. In those moments, the feminine within you is starving. Not because you're not good enough, but because you've been trained to live against your nature for too long. But here's the good news. It has never died. It lives in every dream you don't understand. In the unease when everything is fine, yet you feel lost. In the urge to return to nature, to your body, to emotions you can't explain. You'll see that the feminine is not a vague state. It has form, symbols, and a language of its own. And to understand how the feminine truly lives within you, you must recognize who is operating in the deep temple of your soul, who is whispering that you haven't yet paused to hear. Number 2, the forms of the feminine. If feminine energy is a primal forest, then the archetypes are the spirits dwelling within it, each archetype an ancient symbol, a spiritual embodiment, etched into the collective unconscious for thousands of years. Carl Jung not only uncovered the existence of these archetypes, but also revealed that every woman lives or is shaped by at least one form of the feminine archetype. No archetype is inherently good or bad. They become dangerous only when denied, blindly idealized, or mistaken for a fixed identity. They are not molds to fit yourself into, but mirrors to recognize the energy operating within you, sometimes hidden, sometimes distorted, and sometimes entirely forgotten. So which feminine form are you living in, and which part have you never dared to express? The first and one of the most powerful feminine archetypes is the mother. But Jung emphasized that the mother is not merely the one who gives birth, but a symbol of nurturing, containing, and protecting life. She is a woman who always listens, always cares for others, always ready to sacrifice. In this form, the feminine is like a warm embrace, a home with golden lamplight, a friend present when you fall. But when misaligned, the mother archetype can become the devouring mother, the woman who forgets herself to live for others, controls through care, and binds through love. A woman who constantly checks her partner's phone daily isn't acting out of domination, but because she was never taught to step away from the nurturer's role. She doesn't know that true love doesn't cling, but grants space to grow. When you're so accustomed to caring for others that you forget your own body, emotions, and desires, a vital part of you begins to wither. The part that knows passion, the part that knows too long, the part that lives for itself. This is where the lover emerges, like a blazing wind sweeping through rooms long filled only with the sound of duty. If the mother is earth, steady, receptive, then the lover is living fire, consuming, transformative, vibrant enough to remind you. You weren't born only to sacrifice, but to shine. Not every woman easily shifts from the mother to the lover. For many, this demand feels like selfishness, even wickedness. But in truth, the desire to feel beauty, to touch life with every sense, to be present for yourself, is not a sin but a sacred part stolen from you. According to Jung, the lover is the symbol of passion, creativity, beauty, and sensuality. But don't misunderstand. The lover is not merely about sexuality, but the ability to be fully present in every living moment. Picture a woman standing in the rain. She tilts her head to the sky, letting each drop touch her face, soak into her skin, and slide down her collar. Passers-by might see her as mad or foolish. But for her, it's the first time in years she feels truly alive. She has just left a proper life, full of calculations, a stable job, and a lackluster marriage. She simply couldn't bear it anymore. As the rain touches her eyelids, she suddenly recalls a rainy afternoon at 9 years old, sitting in a small kitchen, watching her mother cry quietly in the dark, her back turned. Her mother said, "You must be strong, study hard, take care of yourself." From that day, she never cried in front of her mother again. But now, standing here, with no one watching, she lets her tears dissolve into the rain. She lets herself remember. She lets herself be weak. The rain doesn't soak her. It washes away all that is no longer here. Women embody in the lover's energy love, without fear of hurt, cry without shame, break without being defeated. But if this archetype is distorted, she may live seeking validation in others' eyes, obsess over allure, or burn impulsively like a fire without a heart. Yet in its purest form, the lover doesn't seek love. She is love. If the mother is the source of life, the lover the flame of passion, then the witch is the gatekeeper of darkness, an archetype of the feminine rarely welcomed but indispensable to the soul's maturation. This is not the prejudiced fairy tale image, an old, cruel woman wielding dark power. In Jungian archetypes, the witch embodies transcendent intuition, ancient knowledge, and the ability to see through the illusions society constructs. She doesn't fear the darkness, for it is from there she draws her strength. She speaks little, but when she does, each word pierces the heart of the matter. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." He understood, no one can truly be themselves without facing and reconciling with their inner darkness. The witch archetype is the one who guides you there. In life, this archetype appears as the woman with a piercing gaze, sometimes making others uncomfortable because she is too direct, too perceptive, and too real. She senses what others dare not say. She reads the hidden motives behind kind words, and she refuses to play society's games. Because of this, she is often called cold, overly serious, or unapproachable. Many women, as they grow, fold away their intuition, soften their intelligence, gentle their voice, bow their heads when they know they're right, just to be loved on others' terms. But deep inside, they feel they're living half a life, the other half locked in darkness. The witch is not mad. She is feared by society. She cannot be manipulated. She doesn't easily forgive deceit. And above all, she doesn't need others to define her worth. She is the woman who reads her dreams, who senses when something is wrong in a relationship before there's proof, who knows when to stay silent to observe and when to speak to unravel. She knows that light untested by darkness is a mere illusion, and intuition, unchecked by personal experience, is just a vague belief. When you connect with this archetype, you begin to trust the sensations in your body again. You don't need others to validate your instincts. You don't deny your inner doubts. And you dare to touch the parts of yourself you once called too strange or unfeminine. You may lose some friends, some relationships, some safe positions, but you will find yourself whole, instinctual, and wise, as Jung wrote. Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. And when you dare to step into the witch's domain, something remarkable happens. You no longer see darkness as an enemy, but as a teacher. Pain is no longer a wound, but a door. This is when the goddess archetype awakens. The goddess, or Jung's Sophia archetype, is the final embodiment of the feminine when a woman has touched the unity of ego and self. Unlike the prior archetypes, this is not one you can imitate. It emerges when you've navigated spiritual trials, faced your shadow, reconciled with your wounded parts, and stopped seeking perfection outside yourself. Jung wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality. In a woman embodying the goddess, you sense this wholeness. A quiet, yet profound presence that invites others to return to their souls. But to reach this form, a woman must undergo a journey of death, birth, rebirth in consciousness. It's when you've lost yourself to please others, when you've wandered in darkness, full of doubt, pain, and emptiness, only to discover that the one you were truly seeking was yourself. Many women think they're strong when they achieve success, let go, or no longer need love. But that's merely escaping the prison. The goddess is not just the one who breaks free. She is the one who rebuilds the temple within, with bricks of truth, tears of acceptance, and light of awareness. In this state, she no longer needs roles. She doesn't worry about being a good mother, an ideal wife, a seductive woman, or a healer. She can be all of these or none, because labels no longer define her identity. She is not perfect. On the contrary, she has been shattered, made mistakes, and lost her way. But from those fragments, she has learned to piece her soul back together with trembling hands and deep faith in life. And when that happens, the goddess arises. Understanding the feminine archetypes isn't about labeling yourself or choosing a new role. It's about listening to which part is alive in you, which part you've neglected, which part you fear. Because sometimes, to know who you are, you must see yourself in the most ancient mirror, where the soul speaks in images, not words. When you truly realize you are not roles, you begin to crave something truer, wilder, more elusive, the primal, untamed feminine energy. But sadly, in a world that increasingly favors performance, this femininity is being turned into an image rather than an experience. Number 3. The feminine cannot be imitated. It must be awakened. Modern society lives amidst a forest of artificial light, dazzling, simulated, glittering, yet cold. The world doesn't lack images of femininity, silk dresses, smoky eyes, gentle words, soft expressions, handwritten letters with scented candles, herbal tea, and the word healing printed on everything from t-shirts to billboards. But true femininity isn't there. True femininity doesn't need to be displayed. It cannot be copied. It doesn't emanate from images. It doesn't arise from a formula for poise or a checklist of 30 ways to be more feminine. Because it doesn't come from the outside, from what others see, but from something only you can feel, deep within your body, your soul, the quietest pulse of your inner being. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul." We learn to perform, to change our outer shell, all to avoid confronting the most frightening thing, our true self. And the feminine, in its archetypal sense, is that part of the soul you cannot control, cannot explain, cannot program. You can only return to it and engage in dialogue. A woman who experienced the awakening of her femininity left a comment on our previous video. "I didn't learn anything to become feminine. I was forced to face the parts of myself I once hated. I was forced to sit in my pain, to hear myself scream, not to be healed by someone else, but to stop rejecting myself." The feminine cannot be simulated because it doesn't operate through reason, doesn't appear in ideal conditions, and certainly doesn't awaken because someone teaches you to live slowly or wear silk dresses. It must be awakened through real experience, often one that no one sees from the outside, but your inner self knows. It's the moment you are no longer the person you once were. Think of a woman who just received a promotion, a position she dreamed of for 7 years, for which she sacrificed her youth. Everyone congratulates her. She smiles, thanks them, and raises a glass of red wine at an elegant party. But when she returns home that night, to a quiet, stone-cold bedroom, she suddenly doesn't know where to place her handbag. Not because the house is too small, but because she no longer feels she belongs here. Not the place, but the person who was just elevated. She sits on the edge of the bed, removing each item from her body like shedding a second skin. She looks at the hands that signed countless contracts, shook countless partners' hands, and realizes that it's been so long since she cared for herself. And in that silence, something stirs. Not a thought, but a feeling, a bodily memory, something primal, soft, warm, smoldering like earth after rain. She begins to decline social engagements she once felt obligated to attend. She spends more time with her mother, with her family, simply to be present as two women, two generations breathing the same air, carrying the same inherited exhaustion that no one dared name before. No one sees this awakening from the outside. But she knows. She has touched her femininity again, not the gentle part, but the profound one. The part that knows how to let go. She knows she doesn't need to conquer anything to be worthy. At this point, if you recognize a similar moment in your life, quiet, profound, like a silent turning of the soul, share it with us in the comments below so you can reread it and know you're not alone. Jungian psychology suggests that the awakening of an archetype always comes with an identity crisis, because you cannot step into a deeper layer of yourself without letting the old layer collapse. The masks you've worn your whole life must fall away before you can become real. And in that moment, the feminine doesn't need to be performed. It emerges naturally through your breath, your gaze, the way you say no gently but uncompromisingly, the way you love someone without losing yourself, the way you touch the world with complete presence, whether cooking a meal or facing loss. This woman doesn't seek attention, but people seek her, because she embodies what the world craves, a heart that still feels, a body not locked away, a soul not trapped by expectations. Jung emphasized, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Only when you become aware of the feminine in your darkness, the suppressed, rejected part labeled irrational or overly emotional, do you begin to truly live with archetypal feminine energy. Otherwise, you'll keep wearing it like ill-fitting clothing, always feeling out of place. And perhaps you, the one reading these words, have felt this, a nameless longing, an emptiness amid abundance, a sense that you're doing everything right, but not living truly. That's the sign that the feminine within is calling, and it's the moment the anima steps out of the shadows. Number 4, the encounter with the anima. In Carl Jung's theory, if the archetypal feminine is an ocean within the soul, then the anima is the moon's reflection on its surface, both real and intangible, yet profoundly influencing every movement of spiritual life. The anima is the feminine archetype in the unconscious of a man, the bridge between the rational conscious world and the sacred emotional, intuitive unconscious. But what is both terrifying and wondrous is this. Most of us don't realize we're living with the anima until a shock, often an emotional upheaval, a psychological crisis, or a haunting dream, forces us to face her. Jung once said, "Every man carries within him the eternal image of woman. This image is fundamentally unconscious, a hereditary factor of primordial origin. The anima is not a real woman. She is a composite image, drawn from all the experiences a man has had with women in his life, especially his mother, his first love, the deep feminine symbols he has seen, desired, loved, or feared. But she is not merely a memory. She is a living, psychological entity in the unconscious, that can either guide a man into emotional depth or drag him into illusion, chaos, and ruin. This explains why many men become obsessed with a woman they barely know, or why they might live with a loving wife yet feel something missing, dreaming of another woman who is more mysterious, wilder, or understands them better. They think they're seeking love, but in truth, they're chasing their own anima through the faces of others. Carl Jung called the anima the soul, not in a religious sense, but as the bridge between the ego and the self. In analytical psychology, the anima is the feminine archetype living in the unconscious of a man, but it is also a sacred part existing in everyone, especially women, as the depth of soul they often lose while chasing external images. If the ego is the captain of a ship, the anima is the inner compass, silent, yet always pointing true north toward home. Encountering the anima is a deep touch in the darkness. There's no radiant light, no applause, just you in a room as still as earth, standing before the part of yourself you've rejected for years. It might be a strange, incomprehensible dream, a sadness with no reason, a sense of being lost in a life full of achievements. The journey to meet the anima often doesn't begin with a choice, but with a crisis. The anima knocks when you're at your weakest, not to make you fall, but to invite you to pause and turn inward. And if you're brave enough to listen, she doesn't appear as a radiant angel. She might show up as an intense emotion, a conflicted love, a psychological storm pulling you out of your comfort zone. For the anima doesn't teach with words, she teaches with feeling. Jung said, "Individuation means becoming an individual, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. And the anima is the guide. When you walk this path, you no longer feel the feminine is something to memorize or perform. You feel it alive in every small act, in the way you breathe, the way you place a hand on your heart in pain, the way you refuse what no longer resonates without needing to justify it. You no longer have to choose between strong and vulnerable, because you understand both are necessary. Strength no longer comes from forcing yourself, but from the groundedness of knowing who you are. Vulnerability is no longer a sign of weakness, but a doorway for life to touch you more deeply. A woman connected to her anima no longer lives through roles. She might be a mother, a lover, a leader, or an artist, but she is not confined by any title, because she doesn't need them to feel her worth. The journey to meet the anima has no map, but there are signs, a dream you can't forget, a recurring symbol, an urge to return to nature, a vague unease when you've done everything right, a glance at someone and seeing the reflection of your untouched self. And if you're courageous enough not to ignore these signs, she will teach you to love life without conditions. Not self-love as a slogan, but a vivid experience. Loving even when you're messy, uncertain, even in pain. Women are often seen as the keepers of the feminine. But the paradox is that the feminine in the form of the anima is what men must learn to approach. And when a man truly begins this journey, it transforms how he shows up in love, in the world, and in you. Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Through the anima, a man finds his way to his own soul, and through her gains a new insight into life and a new set of values. When a man stops projecting his anima outward and begins integrating her into his inner life, a subtle and profound shift occurs. The world is no longer a place to seek love, but a space for the love within to be lived. Integrating the anima doesn't happen because he wants to be more feminine. It happens because he stops fearing the emotional, intuitive, vulnerable, sensitive, sacred parts of himself, parts he may have once mocked in women. When those parts are no longer denied, he doesn't react when you cry, doesn't retreat when you open up, doesn't stay silent when you need connection. And you will notice this not through words, but through the quality of his presence, gentle yet deep, still yet vibrant, not a searching light, but a warm space where you can be yourself. And you, the woman walking your journey, will recognize this difference immediately, because you no longer feel you must attract his love, but instead meet his soul, unfiltered by the ego's shell. Number 5. The process of individuation. Jung didn't view life as a series of tasks to conquer or a self-improvement project as we often see today. Individuation, in the deepest sense Jung described, is not about becoming a better version of yourself. It is the sacred moment when you begin to peel away the layers of masks built by society, family, and your inner fears, and dare to live with the original face of your soul. No one teaches women that they're allowed to stop playing roles. No one tells you that you can stop being gentle when you're angry, stop being composed when you're shattered, stop being strong when you're exhausted. And no one hands you a map to find yourself, because that path isn't in books, but in the darkness you've avoided your entire life. Individuation is when you stop performing. When you're so tired you can't keep forcing, you stop trying to fix it. It's the moment you place a hand on your heart and ask, what in me has been neglected the longest? That's when the feminine within you, the primal pulse of life, begins to seep through the cracks. When you dare to do this, the feminine energy in you shifts. It's no longer something you used to like. It becomes something you live because it is you. You don't need to be gentle because you're truly gentle with yourself. You don't need to act feminine because your presence alone softens the room. You no longer strain to control because you trust the natural rhythm guiding you like a silent but powerful stream. Jung once said, "The self is a living system of opposites." And so it is. Individuation is the art of living with a paradox, both strong and soft, light and dark, nurturing and destructive, sacred and instinctual. A woman who steps into this journey no longer needs to be reasonable. She needs to be real. Imagine a wild forest, no pre-carved paths, only thorns, roots, shadows and sounds you've never named. That's the unconscious. And you, the woman, are the one who dares to enter without a map, not to conquer, but to touch the parts of yourself you've disowned. Individuation doesn't demand you love yourself. It only asks you to stop running. And then, when you're brave enough to sit among the ashes, without seeking solutions, you'll start to hear your breath, for the first time, not through anyone else's echo. In that moment, you don't need anyone to affirm you're feminine. You don't need men's longing gazes. You don't need a group of women cheering you on. You don't need a certificate of healed. You become inimitable, not because you're special, but because you've dug deep into a place few dare to go. From that place, you don't need to be attractive. You attract with a magnetism that defies naming. Not because you know how to attract, but because you embody something ancient, wild and sacred. An energy that makes anyone who enters slow down, That's the energy of a woman who has integrated her darkness without losing her light, who has embraced her pain without becoming its victim, who has died as an ego and been reborn as a soul. And you know what? When you live this way, you don't just heal yourself. You open a path for other women to awaken and step toward themselves. Ultimately, the journey back to the archetypal feminine isn't about becoming someone else. It's about shedding the layers of disguise that have covered your true self for years. And feminine energy, in its deepest sense, is the life that listens to that rhythm, unhurried, unbound, not to become divine, but to live truly, sometimes messy, sometimes contradictory, but always honest. A woman connected to the archetypal feminine doesn't become the best version of herself, as hollow self-help slogans proclaim. She simply returns, whole, unedited, no longer asking permission to be herself. In that return, she doesn't shine dazzlingly, but glows like an unextinguished flame. The most beautiful thing is that the energy she carries creates a ripple effect, touching the dormant parts in other women and calling them to awaken. If this video resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications today. And I want to leave you with a question to sit with, one that could transform your entire relationship with yourself if you dare to answer it with your heart. Are you ready to embark on the journey to understand yourself and awaken the wholeness within?